Welcome back to the deep dive. I want you to take a second and think about the last time you really, really didn't want to do something, but you did it anyway. Maybe it was finishing a presentation at 2 a.m. or, dragging yourself to the gym when it was cold and raining.
Or maybe he was just doing the dishes when the sink was piled high.
Exactly. That specific feeling, that grit, that internal push against resistance, we usually just attribute that to something vague like willpower or character.
We treat it like it's a ghost in the machine,
Mm.
a personality trait, something you either have or you don't.
Right. But today, we are going to find out that it is not a ghost. It is a very specific, very real, biological piece of machinery sitting right in the center of your head.
A physical structure you can point to.
Today, we are tackling the cingulate cortex.
And this is one of those brain regions that, well, everyone's kind of heard of it. It gets vaguely tossed around with the limbic system. But almost no one actually understands the architecture of it.
The actual nuts and bolts.
Exactly. And the sources we have for today are going to completely dismantle that old, fuzzy view of this structure.
So we are moving way beyond the high school biology textbook version of the emotional brain.
Oh, way beyond.
And we have a stack of heavy hitters to guide us. We're talking about fundamental neuroanatomical work from Brent Vogt, some really elegant computational neuroscience from Edmund Rolls, and this is exciting, some brand new 2025 research on memory and simulation that changes the game.
It really does. The whole thesis regarding the cingulate has shifted. It used to be seen as just the feeling center. But if you look at the literature we're covering today, especially the work from, say, 2019 to 2025, the cingulate is revealed as this massive integration hub.
An integration hub for what?
For everything that makes us agents. It's responsible for how we feel, yes, but also for how we move, how we understand where we are in space, and maybe even who we are.
That's a big claim. You're saying it's the seat of the self?
In many ways, yeah. It's the bridge between the animal brain and the human mind. The structure that lets us act with purpose.
Okay, so before we get into the heavy philosophy of agency and the self, let's get our bearings. Literally, where is this thing in the brain? I know the name cingulate comes from the Latin for belt or girdle.
And that's the perfect visual metaphor to hold in your mind. If you could see a cross-section of the brain split right down the middle between the two hemispheres.
The classic textbook view.
The classic view, exactly. You'd see this dense white bridge of fibers connecting the left and right hemispheres. That's the corpus callosum.
The information superhighway. Billions of axons firing back and forth.
Right. Now imagine a thick collar of gray matter wrapping right around that bridge. It starts low in the front of the brain, curves up and over the top, and then tucks down in the back. That belt is the cingulate cortex.
So it's physically hugging the very center of the brain, the core.
Exactly. And in neuroscience, geography is destiny. Its position tells us everything about its function. It's not out on the surface dealing with raw sensory data. It's deep inside, mediating.
Mediating what?
Mediating between the old brain and the new brain. And to really get this, we have to introduce a concept that Edmund Rolls discusses extensively in his 2019 paper in Brain Structure and Function. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's the key to the whole episode.
Okay, let's hear it.
The concept is prosocortex.
Prosocortex, okay, that sounds like a geological era or something.
It does, but it's actually about cellular architecture. It's about how the brain is built layer by layer. This is really the core idea. So you have two main types of cortex in the brain. You have what's called the allocortex.
Allo, as in other.
Yeah, as in ancient or other. It's the primitive stuff, like the hippocampus, which is our memory center, or the olfactory cortex for smell. It has a simpler structure, maybe 3 layers of cells. It handles raw data, basic drives, memory traces.
And this is the so-called reptile brain, essentially.
Roughly, yes, a useful shorthand. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the neocortex, the new bark.
That's a wrinkly gray stuff on the outside?
Exactly. The 6-layered, high-powered, massively interconnected outer shell that allows us to do calculus and write poetry and plan for retirement.
So you have the old 3-layered brain and the new 6-layered brain. Where does the cingulate fit in?
The cingulate is prosocortex. It's structurally between them. It has more layers than the ancient allocortex, but fewer than the modern neocortex, maybe 4 or 5 layers. It is the physical and functional bridge.
So it's the translator.
Precisely. That's the perfect word for it. It takes the raw, hot data from the deep brain, the hunger signals, the fear from the amygdala, the memory fragments from the hippocampus, and it translates them into a language that the high-level executive cortex can understand and use to make a plan.
That makes so much sense of why it would be involved in both emotion, which is primal, and complex actions, which are calculated. It's the go-between.
It's the ultimate go-between.
But you mentioned in the pre-show notes that for a long, long time we got this wrong. We used to just call it the limbic system and call it a day.
We did, and honestly, a lot of textbooks probably still do. It's an idea that's been around since the 1950s, this idea of a single emotional circuit. But we really need to look at the work of Brent Vogt.
Okay.
He wrote what is essentially the modern Bible on this. It's Chapter 1, Regions and Subregions of the Cingulate Cortex, in the 2019 edition of the Handbook of Clinical Neurology.
And I take it he is not a fan of the term limbic system.
Not a fan is putting it mildly. Vogt argues, very forcefully, that the term limbic system is outdated and is actually hindering clinical progress.
Hindering progress? How? Is it just semantics, just arguing over names?
No, it's much more than that. It's about precision. The term limbic system implies that everything in that loop, the hippocampus, the amygdala, the cingulate, does the same basic thing.
Which is emotion.
Right. It treats the cingulate as one homogeneous blob that just does feelings. But Vogt's painstaking anatomical work proves that the cingulate is highly heterogeneous. The front of the belt is completely different from the middle of the belt, which is different from the back of the belt.
Different cells, different connections, different jobs.
Completely different connections, different cellular structures, and therefore completely different functions. If you have a patient with damage in the back of the cingulate and you try to treat them with a therapy designed for a problem in the front, you're going to fail. You're aiming at the wrong target.
So we need a better map.
We need a much better map.
Yeah.
And Vogt provides one. He proposes a 4-region model that we really need to internalize if we want to understand this.
Okay, let's map this belt out. If we're an electrical signal traveling along the cingulate cortex, what are the 4 main stops on the tour?
Okay, so we usually move anterior to posterior from the front of your head to the back. Stop number 1 is the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC. This is the part most people are talking about when they talk about emotion and the cingulate.
The famous one.
The famous one. Stop number 2, and this is one we're going to spend a lot of time on because it's so often ignored or mislabeled, is the mid-cingulate cortex, the MCC.
He ignored middle child of the brain.
The ignored middle child that actually runs the entire show, as we'll see. Then, stop 3, moving further back, you have the posterior cingulate cortex, the PCC.
Okay.
And finally, tucked way underneath that back curve, almost hidden, is the retrosplenial cortex, or RSC.
Sure.
We can think of it as a specialized part of the PCC for our purposes.
So ACC, MCC, PCC, and RSC.
Correct. And the big crucial shift here, the aha moment that comes from Vogt's very detailed anatomical work, is realizing that the mid-cingulate, the MCC, is not just the back part of the front part. It is qualitatively functionally distinct.
How so? What makes it so different?
Its connections. The ACC connects down to the amygdala and the reward centers. It's wired for feeling and value. The MCC connects out to the spinal cord. It connects directly to the motor cortex. It is wired for action.
Feeling versus doing.
Value versus action. That's the fundamental split. And lumping them together as one emotional region has held back our understanding for decades.
This is incredible. We're going to have to do a deep dive into each of these because the nuance sounds like it's everything here. Let's start at the front. With the ACC, what is its main mission?
Its main mission, if we go back to Edmund Rolls's 2019 framework, is all about action outcome value.
Value. That's an interesting word choice. We usually think of emotion as feelings. Happy, sad, angry. You're using the word value, which sounds more economic.
In modern neuroscience, those are basically the same thing. Rolls makes a very compelling argument in his work that emotion is simply the brain's way of assigning a value tag to an outcome in order to drive behavior.
So my feeling of happiness when I eat a piece of cake is just my brain stamping that cake with a label that says, high value, do this again.
Exactly. It's a behavioral command disguised as a feeling. The ACC receives a constant stream of input from a region called the orbitofrontal cortex, or OFC. The OFC is like the raw sensor. It tells the brain what tastes good, what hurts, what leads to a monetary reward, what leads to social approval.
It's the raw data of pleasure and pain.
Right. The ACC's job is to take that raw data and connect it to specific actions. It calculates, given the current situation, how much is this reward worth to me right now?
It's the accountant of the soul.
It's a good analogy. It's constantly calculating the exchange rate between effort and reward. But here is where it gets really, really interesting, especially for a social species like us. It doesn't just calculate my value.
It calculates other people's value.
It calculates the value of outcomes for other people.
Whoa. Okay, talk to me about the social aspect. I saw this paper by Patricia Lockwood in the Stack.
Yes, this is a fascinating line of research. Lockwood and colleagues published a key study in Current Biology back in 2020, and it builds on related work by Matthew Apps in Neuron from 2016. They looked at the ACC's specific role in what they call social valuation.
Is that like judging people? Because
Yeah.
my brain does a lot of that.
It's more like judging their motivation, and not in a moral sense, but in a predictive sense. The gyrus part of the ACC, the outer fold, specifically activates when we are trying to estimate how much effort someone else is willing to invest in a task.
Why does my brain need a dedicated circuit to know how hard you're working?
For one very simple, evolutionarily critical reason: cooperation.
Ah.
If we're going to hunt a mammoth together
Yeah.
or build a shelter or, well, record this deep dive, I need to have a model in my head of how committed you are. If I can't value your effort, if I can't predict your willingness to work, I can't cooperate with you effectively. I might get stuck doing all the work, or I might misjudge when to offer help.
So what we call empathy isn't just this fuzzy feeling of I feel your pain. It's my brain running a simulation. I understand your resource allocation.
That's a very cynical but really very accurate way to put it. Lockwood's work showed that the ACC is absolutely necessary for learning to reward others. It's the part of the brain that allows us to feel good when someone else succeeds, because we can model the value of that success to them.
And this ties into learning too, right? There was another paper, Burgos-Roble et al., from 2019 in Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews that talked about observational learning.
Yes, this is the neural mechanism for monkey see, monkey do, but on a much more complex level. The ACC is what allows us to learn by watching others. If I see you touch a hot stove and flinch in pain, my ACC lights up in a very specific way.
It simulates the pain.
It simulates the negative value. It learns stove equals bad outcome without me having to burn my own hand. It links the social cue, your pained expression, to my own internal value system.
That is an incredibly efficient way to learn about the world.
It's the basis of culture. We don't have to learn everything from scratch by trial and error. We can download knowledge by watching.
But the ACC isn't just about successful cooperation and learning. It's also the part that can go terribly wrong in things like depression, right? Feeling of sadness.
Yes, and for that we have to zoom in on a specific subregion. It's called the subgenual ACC. It's a little patch of cortex tucked way down underneath the front curve of the corpus callosum, below the genu, or the knee.
Subgenual, literally meaning below the knee.
Correct, and it is a critical area. A very recent paper just out, Zhu and colleagues in neuropsychopharmacology, slated for 2025, looked at symptom-specific alterations in this area in patients with major depressive disorder.
And what did they find?
They identified this specific region as the central hub of the visceromotor network.
Visceromotor, that's a great word. Viscera like gut feelings and motor like action.
That's it. It connects the emotional brain to the autonomic nervous system. You have that deep physical sensation of profound sadness, the heaviness in your chest, the knot in your stomach.
Lump in your throat, yeah.
That is the subgenual ACC driving the viscera, your internal organs, to physically react to a powerfully negative value calculation in your brain. Zhu's research shows that in clinical depression, this region becomes hyperactive. It's stuck in a feedback loop.
A broken alarm system.
A perfect metaphor. It's a broken alarm that won't turn off. It just keeps sending that extreme negative value signal down to the body, resulting in that pervasive, heavy physical feeling of sadness and the mental state of rumination that goes with it.
And this must be why, for people with the most severe treatment-resistant depression, they sometimes target this exact area with electrical stimulation.
Exactly. Deep brain stimulation, or DBS for depression, often involves implanting an electrode right near the subcallosal cingulate to try to reset this overactive loop. It's a very direct attempt to break that vicious cycle of negative valuation and negative visceral feedback.
So the front of the belt, the ACC, is doing a massive amount of work. It's handling value for me, value for you. It's modeling other people's minds, and it's controlling the physical sensation of mood.
It's a busy place.
Okay. Now let's move back along the belt to the middle, the mid-cingulate cortex, or MCC.
This is my favorite part of the story.
I can tell. You genuinely lit up when we started talking about this in the pre-production meeting. Why is this part so special?
Well, it's because it's the underdog. For decades, anatomists and cognitive neuroscientists just lumped this area in with the ACC. They call it the dorsal ACC, or the cognitive division. But it's not a division. Functionally, It is a completely different world.
You mentioned the connections are different. Remind us how.
The ACC, as we said, connects inward and downward to the reward centers like the OFC and the emotional centers like the amygdala. The MCC connects outward and downward. It sends massive projections to the parietal lobe for spatial awareness, and crucially, directly down to the motor cortices and even the spinal cord.
So ACC is about feeling and valuing, and MCC is about doing.
MCC is about action, but it's a very specific and I would argue very human kind of action. And this brings us to what I think is the showstopper concept for this entire brain region, the concept of tenacity.
The will to persevere.
Yes. There is a landmark paper by Alexandra Tourteglou and her team, published in the journal Cortex in 2020. It's titled, simply, The Tenacious Brain. And they make the powerful argument that the anterior part of the mid-cingulate, the AMCC, is the central hub for tenacity.
Okay, let's define tenacity in a biological sense. Is it just being stubborn?
It's more than that. It's the ability to sustain a behavior in the face of high costs, in the face of fatigue or pain, or a lack of immediate reward. It's the engine that keeps you going when every other signal in your body is screaming, stop.
And how do they know this specific patch of brain is where it lives? I mean, tenacity seems like a really hard thing to put in an fMRI machine and measure.
It is hard to measure with imaging alone, you're right. You can see it activate when people are doing hard tasks, but that's just a correlation. But the most striking, the most incredible evidence, and this is the story that really just blew my mind when I first read it, comes from intracranial stimulation.
Directly stimulating the brain in awake patients.
Yes. There is a study that is just legendary in this field. It's cited in Tourteglou's paper and also discussed by Kleinflug in 2022. But the original paper is from Parvizi and colleagues, published in Neuron way back in 2013.
I read this one for the show. This is the driving into the storm patient, isn't it?
Yes. Let's set the scene, because it's so important. These are patients with severe epilepsy. To find the source of their seizures, neurosurgeons implant electrodes deep inside their brains for days at a time. This gives researchers an incredibly rare and precious ethical window to stimulate very specific, tiny spots and just ask the patient, what are you feeling right now?
So they put a tiny bit of current into the mid-cingulate. What happens? Does the person's arm twitch? Do they feel happy or sad?
Nothing like that. The patient doesn't feel pain, they don't feel sadness, they don't feel fear, they don't even feel an emotion they can name.
So what do they feel?
They reported a feeling of approaching a challenge, an impending sense that they had to overcome something. One patient described it as a feeling of driving into a storm, knowing it would be difficult but feeling ready for it.
That is so specific and so poetic for a clinical report.
It is. Another patient said they felt a sudden, undeniable urge to push against some kind of resistance. They felt a physical will to persevere. They felt like they had to push something away or fight through something even though they were just lying comfortably in a hospital bed.
So the electrical signal didn't create an emotion or a sensation. It created the feeling of needing to exert effort against an obstacle.
It created the agency. It turned on the grit switch. It was in that moment the researchers realized this region isn't just monitoring conflict like we used to think. It's generating the motivational force to resolve it.
This has to connect to that other theory, the expected value of control, right?
It connects perfectly. That's the work of Amitai Shenhav and his colleagues, published in Nature Neuroscience in 2016. They argue that the MCC is essentially running a constant, real-time cost-benefit analysis for mental and physical effort.
The accountant is back again.
But it's a different kind of accounting. The ACC, the front part, asks, is the reward at the end of this journey good? The MCC asks a harder question. Is the effort of the journey worth it?
So it's weighing the cognitive costs, the metabolic burn, the glucose, the stress of focusing against the potential payout that the ACC has flagged.
Exactly. It's calculating the expected value of control. It asks, is it worth the burn to focus on this really hard math problem for another hour, or should I just give up and watch TV? And if the MCC's calculation comes out positive, if it decides the goal is worth the pain, it engages the motor areas. It drives that will to persevere we just talked about.
And if the cost is calculated as too high?
It signals you to quit. It allows you to disengage and conserve energy. It's the voice that says, you know what, this isn't worth it.
This completely changes how I think about concepts like laziness. Or even apathy.
It absolutely should. Apathy, which is a huge and devastating problem in many neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. It might not be a lack of desire. Patients might still value the outcomes, but it could be a dysfunction in the MCC's calculator.
It's not that they don't want the thing, it's that the activation energy calculation is broken. Their brain is erroneously calculating that the effort for any action is too high, so it never flips the switch to go.
Precisely. The will to act is never generated. And physically, this makes sense. As Rolls points out in his 2019 paper, the MCC projects directly to the premotor areas. It is the literal place where this high-level action outcome learning gets translated into the physical command to move. It's where the rubber meets the road.
Wow. Okay, so we have the ACC in the front doing value and social modeling. We have the MCC in the middle doing tenacity and effort calculation. Now we need to finish the tour of the belt. Let's go to the back. The posterior cingulate cortex, the PCC.
The back of the bus.
What's happening back there? It feels like we've already covered everything important.
We are entering a very different world now. The connectivity changes completely again. The PCC isn't heavily connected to the motor system or the core reward centers. The PCC is massively reciprocally connected to the parietal lobe and the hippocampus.
Okay, hippocampus means memory. That's easy. Parietal lobe is what?
Spatial awareness, navigation, your sense of your body in space. So while the front of the cingulate is about value and action, the back is about space and memory.
That seems like a really weird pivot. How does where I am connect to how I feel and what I do?
Context. It's all about context. You can't have an appropriate emotional reaction or plan a sensible action if you don't know where you are or what has happened to you before in a similar place.
Right, okay.
So Edmund Rolls explains that the PCC receives this visuospatial information from the parietal lobe. Where are the walls? Where is the door? Where are the objects in the room? And it binds that information to the memory being formed in the hippocampus.
So it creates episodic memories. Not just I spilled a drink, but I was at the coffee shop standing by the counter when I spilled the drink.
Exactly. The PCC provides the at the coffee shop part. It anchors the self in a specific time and place. It builds the stage for your life's memories. But the PCC is famous, or maybe infamous, for another reason.
Which is?
It is a metabolic powerhouse. It is one of the most energy-hungry regions of the entire brain. It consistently consumes about 40% more glucose and oxygen than the average brain region.
40%? Why is it burning so much fuel all the time? What is it doing?
It is the central beating heart of the default mode network, the DMN.
Ah, the DMN. The network that turns on when we aren't doing anything. The mind-wandering network.
That's the classic definition, yes. When you're sitting in a waiting room and your mind drifts off, when you daydream, when you think about what you did last weekend, when you plan what you're going to do tomorrow, that's your DMN. And the PCC is its grand central station.
A paper by Leach and Sharp, a major review in the journal Brain from 2013, described the PCC as an arousal toggle. What do they mean by a toggle?
They mean it balances our focus. It toggles between internal thought, which is the DMN, and external attention. When you're daydreaming, the PCC is humming along, coordinating that internal movie. But the second a tiger jumps at you, or more likely the second your phone buzzes, the PCC's activity needs to change, suppressing the DMN so you can orient your attention to the outside world.
And if that toggle fails...
You get attention deficits. You literally can't snap out of your own head to deal with what's in front of you. You see DMN dysfunction in ADHD, in schizophrenia, in Alzheimer's.
But there's a newer, more active theory about the DMN and the PCC too, isn't there? That's where the 2025 paper from Foster and Kozlov comes in. It's in current opinion in behavioral science.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really, really cool. Foster and his group argue that the PCC isn't just for internal, fluffy, mind-wandering thought. They suggest the PCC sits at the apex of a cognitive hierarchy.
The top of the pyramid.
The very top. They argue it's constantly, actively integrating our past experiences from the hippocampus with our ongoing sensory feedback about the present moment, all in the service of one goal: to simulate potential future scenarios.
It's a simulator. You mean like a holodeck in my head?
That's a perfect analogy. It's constantly running models. If I walk into that room, based on my memory of that room and what I see right now, what is likely to happen? Where will the chair be? Who might I talk to? It creates the virtual stage upon which the ACC and MCC can then act.
Wow. So you can't have a will to persevere from the MCC toward a goal if you don't first have a simulation of where you're going and what it might be like, which is generated by the PCC.
Yeah, you're seeing the whole system. The PCC builds the world, the ACC values the options within that simulated world, and the MCC generates the will to move through it.
That ties it all together beautifully. But before we fully synthesize this, there is one more player we have to mention. It's not technically part of the cingulate belt, but in every brain scan I've ever seen, it seems to be its by a trend, the insula.
You absolutely cannot talk about the cingulate without talking about the insula. It's a separate little island of cortex tucked away deep in the side of the brain. But in almost every fMRI study on pain, empathy, craving, or emotion, if the cingulate lights up, the insula lights up right alongside it. Together, they form what's called the salience network.
The what is important right now network.
That's it. So what's the division of labor? They're both feeling things, but they do it in different ways. A great review by McBenedict and colleagues in Curious from 2024 breaks this down beautifully in the context of pain.
Okay, so how does it work with pain?
The insula processes the objective sensory awareness of the sensation. It's the part that says, my arm hurts, the sensation is burning. It is sharp, it is located on the left forearm, it provides the raw sensory data.
The raw feed, the facts of the matter.
Right. The cingulate, specifically the ACC and MCC, processes the affective and the motivational aspect.
Yeah.
It's the part that says, this is bad, this is unpleasant, I am suffering, I need to do something to make this stop, like move my arm.
So the insula is I feel pain, and the cingulate is I care that I'm in pain.
Precisely. And we know they are distinct because of a bizarre and tragic neurological condition called pain asymbolia.
What on earth is that?
It can happen after very specific strokes or damage that severs the connection between the insula and the cingulate, or damages the cingulate itself. A doctor can take a needle and prick the patient's skin, and if you ask them what they feel, they'll say, yes, that is a sharp needle. Yes, I can feel the painful sensation.
But do they pull away? Do they react?
No. They don't wince, they don't cry out, they might even smile or laugh while it's happening. They describe the pain with a strange, detached curiosity, as if they were describing the color of the wall. The unpleasantness, the emotional drive to stop the pain, is completely gone because the cingulate isn't valuing the signal from the insula as bad.
That is genuinely terrifying. It separates the raw sensation from the experience of suffering.
It proves that suffering is a distinct neurological process, computed separately from the sensation itself. And this is absolutely crucial for understanding chronic pain.
How so?
A 2024 study by Lid and others in Current Addiction Reports discusses how this whole cingulate insula salience network changes in chronic pain and addiction.
Does it just get stronger?
It gets rigid. It gets stuck in an always-on state. In a healthy brain, the salience network is flexible, it flags what's important, you deal with it, and then it lets go. In chronic pain, the network becomes pathologically stable. It constantly flags the pain signal as the most important thing in the universe, preventing the brain from switching its attention to other tasks.
The cingulate gets locked into that this is bad, pay attention now mode, even if the original injury in the body has healed.
Exactly. The will to persevere machinery in the MCC gets hijacked by the pain signal. It prevents you from persevering in anything else because all of your motivational resources are being consumed by the pain.
This brings us perfectly to the synthesis. We've dissected the belt. We have the PCC in the back, simulating the world and our place in it. We have the ACC in the front, valuing the outcomes in that world. And we have the MCC in the middle, driving the effort to achieve them. How does Edmund Rolls tie this all together into a grand unification theory?
Rolls calls it simply the system for action outcome learning. It's the full package. Think about it as a sequence of events for any purposeful decision you make.
Okay, walk us through a concrete example. Let's use, I see a steep hill, and I know from a map that there's a great view at the top.
A perfect example. So
Okay.
Step 1. The PCC, the posterior cingulate, is your navigator and simulator. It combines your visual input of the hill with your memory of previous hikes and what a view looks like. It places you in space and simulates the potential future. I'm at the bottom of this hill. The top is up there. Reaching it is possible.
Okay, my context is established. I know where I am and what the goal is.
Step 2. The ACC, the anterior cingulate, kicks in. It receives input from your reward centers. Views are beautiful. Accomplishment feels good. This will be a great story to tell later. It assigns a high value to the goal of reaching the top.
The motivation is established. I want it.
Step 3. The MCC, the mid-cingulate, does the hard math. It's the engineer. It calculates the cost. The hill is steep. My legs are already a bit tired. This will require a high expenditure of energy and will involve some discomfort. It's integrating those signals of fatigue and strain from the insula.
The cost-benefit analysis.
The equation runs in real time. The MCC compares the cost it's calculating against the value the ACC is screaming about. If the value of the view is higher than the cost of the climb, the MCC triggers the will to persevere. It sends the command to the motor cortex, walk. It actively suppresses or overrides the insula's signal of my legs hurt in service of the higher long-term goal.
That is just such an elegant, beautiful loop. It's a complete self-contained system for explaining human agency.
It's the machinery of agency. It takes the where from the PCC and the why from the ACC and turns it into the how from the MCC.
And if any single part of that loop breaks,
The entire system of purposeful action fails. If you damage the PCC, you get lost, both physically and mentally. You lose the context of your own life, like in early Alzheimer's. You can't simulate the future, so you can't act.
okay.
Damage the ACC. You get apathy. You lose motivation. You might see the hill, and you might be physically capable of climbing it, but you just don't care about the view or about the feeling of accomplishment. The why is gone.
And damage to the MCC.
You lose the grit. You see the hill. You want the view, but you look at the steepness, and your brain's calculator says cost too high. You decide it's too hard, and you turn around. The how fails.
This really reinforces that three-function theory idea. It's not just one limbic lobe. It's a full decision-making suite with specialized components.
Exactly. And it suggests that something like grit or tenacity isn't just a fixed character trait you have or don't have. It's a dynamic calculation that your brain is performing moment to moment.
And as we hinted at with the Tourette-Glue and Foster papers, this whole system is plastic, right? It can change.
That's maybe the most hopeful part of all this.
Yeah.
The evidence suggests that the MCC, in particular, behaves like a muscle. Consistently engaging in tasks that require high tenacity doing things you don't feel like doing for a delayed reward seems to maintain the structural integrity and thickness of the MCC, especially as we age.
Wait, really?
Yes. There's a fascinating line of research on superagers. These are people in their 80s and 90s who have the memory and cognitive function of people in their 50s. And one of the most consistent findings is that they often have remarkably thick, healthy mid-cingulate cortices.
That is the ultimate biological argument for use it or lose it. Pushing through challenges physically builds the part of your brain that allows you to push through challenges.
It really, really is.
So we've come a very long way from the emotional brain. We've deconstructed this belt and found a prosocortical bridge that serves as the navigator, the accountant, and the engine for our will.
And I think it provides a really empowering perspective. When you feel that resistance, when you feel that internal struggle of wanting to quit, that feeling isn't a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that your MCC is working. It's engaged in the calculation. It's doing its job. It's deciding to push into the storm.
I love that. The will to persevere isn't some magic mystical force. It's your cingulate cortex firing on all cylinders.
It's your biology working for you.
As always, we've put the links to all the papers we discussed: Vogt on the anatomy, Rolls on the theory, Tourette-Glue on tenacity, Parvizi on the direct stimulation, and the new 2025 studies, all in the show notes. If you want to dig deeper into any of this, I'd say start with the Parvizi paper on the stimulation study. It is a genuinely wild read.
Highly recommended.
Yeah.
It really does change how you see yourself and your own internal struggles.
Thank you so much for listening. Next time you face a challenge and choose to push forward, take a moment to thank your mid-cingulate, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.